Hi, class. This will be the lecture on John Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn. I'm showing this picture first because this is very likely what Keats saw when he writes about the Grecian urn. This is, in fact, a copy of an ancient Greek vase, probably from the British Museum. Um, and so he talks about the figures in it, but this would be something approximately um, the kind of thing he would have seen and the kind of thing he's describing in this poem. Okay, now I want to get to the poem. First, I want to talk a little bit about what this poem is. Of course, it's an ode, but it also is a thing called an ekphrasis. An ekphrasis simply means um, a description of a work of art in order to understand its significance, its depth of meaning. And that's essentially what Ode on Grecian Urn is. Um, okay, so let me just start reading the poem and I'll try to go over as much of it as I can. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. Unlike Ode to a Nightingale, this poem begins with a um, enthusiastic description of what he's seeing. And when he refers to the unravished bride of quietness, he's talking about the urn itself. Um, it is unravished because it has ravish means um, had relationships, sort of has consummated a marriage, but this urn remains pure and virginal, right? It's an unravished bride of quietness, right? It cannot speak. It's a visual medium. He says, "Thou foster child of silence and slow time." Um, it is the substitute that we have for history, right? We have artifacts like this. It's a foster child. History cannot speak to us. History can only speak to us through things like artifacts, real artifacts like this. Sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. Sylvan just means in the forest historian. It's the historian of what happens there in the forest um, of ancient Greek myths and things like that. He canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. And he talks about um, the urn expressing uh, a story, a tale, a narrative, much better than poetry, much more sweetly than our rhyme. He says. He talks about the floweriness. If you look back on the picture, there is um, you can't see it here, but it is fringed with sort of laurel flowers and things like that. It's a kind of decoration of the pottery that was very popular in classical Greece. Um, Now he starts to ask questions. He goes on, "What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape? Of deities or mortals, or of both? In Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maidens loath? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy?" So the more he looks at this vase, this artifact, he starts to imagine or starts to wonder what the urn is depicting. Is it depicting a legend um, of deities or mortals, of gods, or of humans, or both perhaps? Where is it located? Is it in Tempe or is it in the Dales of Arcady? These are all um, places that are very famous in ancient Greece. Tempe and Arcady, things like that. Delphi. What men or gods are these? What he's wondering: is this Hercules? Is this Zeus? What maidens loath? Talking about their men and women. So he talks about what are the women doing? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? Um, Again, he is very enthusiastic and caught up in this kind of life that is being depicted on this urn, and he wants to know what it is. Pipes and timbrels. There's a musician. There's all this stuff going on the urn, and the depiction is so incredibly exciting and interesting to him. He wants to find out more about it. The second stanza: heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore ye soft pipes play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared. Pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. There is a musician on this urn, and of course, musicians are playing music. Of course, this is a visual medium, so you cannot hear that music. He says, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Um, the melodies that are not actually heard in time, because music occurs in time, um, those the music depicted visually is sweeter. It is more um, ideal. Uh, he says, therefore, soft pipe play on, not to the sensual ear, not to the sound of the ear, the human ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. He sort of luxuriates in the fact that these songs being played by the musicians on this urn are not physical, that they exist in a kind of imaginative space, in a kind of frozen space, right? We can imagine what those sounds are like. Um, he goes on, fair youth beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Of course, the static scene. So he sees a youth under a tree, and he says, he calls the youth a bold lover. Never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve, she cannot fade. Though thou hast not thy bliss, forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. So he's looking at this kind of, it's a wedding scene on this urn with a lover and a girl, and they're frolicking. And he says that the bold lover cannot kiss the girl because they haven't, because it's frozen in that picture. The lover has not yet kissed the bride, and he realizes this. But then he thinks, that's okay. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve. She cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss, forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. It doesn't matter if she kisses. If she's caught up in that state, she'll forever be in that mood, in that state of happiness and love. right? He says, do not grieve. She cannot fade. It's not like they're going to kiss and she's going to go away and she's going to fall out of love with him. They're in this perfect moment. Um, and they're frozen in this perfect moment. They're captured in this perfect moment. And there isn't any of those things like time that can take this moment away. Finally, she says, she cannot fade, though that has not thy bliss forever without love, and she be fair. She'll always be young, right? And she will always love the bold lover. Next, ah, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. So, much like the last stanza, since the things are frozen, he talks about those happy boughs, those branches on the trees that are perpetually blossoming, uh, that have leaves on them, that will never fade, that will never um, fall off during the autumn. Happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. It will always be spring in this picture, right? And the trees will always look this beautiful. Um, and happy melodist. The melodist is the musician, the flute player. And happy melodist, unwearied, forever piping songs, forever new. So this musician, this piper who is on the urn, is playing a song, and he will never get weary. He will never get tired of the song. And the song will never get old. It will ever be forever piping songs, forever new. You know, it's one of those things. He thinks that even though the song is beautiful, because you can't hear it, it'll never get old. It will always be new. Um, that makes any sense. Again, we have to kind of get what the inner logic here is what Keats's inner logic here is. It is that fantasy of a beautiful, lovely, happy moment frozen in time forever. And how great would that be? How wonderful would that be? That certainly is something to celebrate. Forever piping songs, forever new, more happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting and forever young. All breathing human passion far above, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. So breathing human passion is less than what is happening here. Real life is less, right? All breathing human fashion far above, which means he's referring to the urn, that the urn's static image is far above all breathing, living human passion. Because why? Because it leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, right? Real human passion leaves pain and heartache, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. Right? Real human passion tires out, it fades, it dies, it goes bad. Not this urn, however, because this urn is forever captured, and it is a portrait of human emotional perfection. All right, so before I go to this next stanza, I want to show another picture. It is here, and this is one of the friezes from the Parthenon in Athens. These are called the Elgin Marbles, and they were essentially taken during the 19th century um, by an English aristocrat from Athens, from the frieze of the temple, the Parthenon temple, and brought to England. And so Keats would have seen something like this. And this is a beautiful kind of ancient um, Greek sculpture. You can tell this is a relief sculpture. And a lot of scholars believe that when he talks about this next stanza, he is actually referring to one of these friezes that are depicted in the British Museum. Keats would have definitely seen this, and he actually wrote a really great poem, a sonnet called On First Looking at the Elgin Marbles, or something like that. But it's a sonnet on the Elgin Marbles, which are these friezes from the Parthenon. And here you see people bringing a heifer, a cow, um, probably for a kind of sacrifice to a god or something like that. It's a kind of a festival scene, sort of religious festival scene. So, okay, let's go back to the poem. Okay. So he sees this. Again, it's not the same urn. He sees something else. He sees perhaps the other side of the urn, or his mind goes to another scene because he's talking about Grecian urns, and therefore he talks about Grecian art as a whole. And Grecian art is this kind of one thing uh, to Keats. And he begins, as he does in the very beginning of the poem, asking questions. What are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar? O mysterious priest, leadest thou that heifer lowing at the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? Right? Talking about a sacrifice scene, and they're leading, this priest is leading a heifer, which is a bull, which is a cow, and the cow is all decorated with garlands, flower garlands. What little town by river or seashore, or mountain built with peaceful citadel, is emptied of this folk, this pious morn? And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can ne'er return. Now this is a bit complex, and I want to explain it this way. He imagines the whole Greek town going to this festival and going to the town center or whatever in order to participate in this festival. But he starts to wonder about the town or the city, the village where everyone left. He says, there's a little town, right? What little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peaceful citadel is emptied of this folk this pious morn? If you're going to that scene, you will no longer be in the other scene, right? You will no longer be in the other place. So if that scene of the sacrifice of the cow is happening and all the townsfolk are there, therefore the town itself will be empty. And since these things are perpetual and these things are frozen, the town forever will be frozen, forever will be empty, desolate, he calls it. Just as the place where they are sacrificing the heifer will always be full. So he sort of brings a kind of logic to its conclusion. He sort of, if all these scenes are frozen in that one particular moment, there will be other scenes that are frozen as well. And the kind of desolation and emptiness and loneliness of those other scenes have to be equally legitimate, right? I hope that makes some kind of sense, because he imagines a desolate town, right? Oh, Attic shape, fair attitude with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought. Again, he is practicing this ode, right? He wants to celebrate it, right? It's an Attic shape. Um, Attic just means there's a place in Greece called Attica. Um, Attic shape, fair attitude with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought with forest branches and the trodden weed. Thou silent form dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity, cold pastoral. Okay, so he celebrates this beautiful sort of image. He describes it again, but he talks about it the same way he talks about the nightingale toward the end of Ode to a Nightingale. He calls a nightingale a deceiving elf. In the same way, he calls the vase a cold pastoral, right? He says, thou silent form, because it doesn't say anything, it just shows, thou silent form dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity, which means it lies to us. Lie is a strong word. He says, tease us out of thought. It makes us imagine a reality that is not possible. That's what he means when he says it teases us out of thought, as doth eternity. It's like thinking about what eternity is. It can never really kind of be understood, right? And ultimately, with the exclamation point, he calls it a cold pastoral. A pastoral is one of these idealistic stories of country life, cold pastoral. Again, the coldness comes from the urn itself. It is a cold artifact, right? Unlike real life, um, which is full of passion and heat and movement. This thing is cold and it's still and it's quiet. All those things that he loved about it, he starts to realize that actually this image, this thing that is supposed to symbolize all the great things about life and all the ideal things that Keats desires, love and beauty, um, they ultimately, because they are dead, they are a work of art. He calls it a cold pastoral. And he continues, he says, when old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain. In midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. Probably two of the most famous lines in all of English poetry. So he says there's still value to this urn because it will still remain. It will still be around after he's dead, after generations are gone. It will still be there, and people will still look at it, and it will still always reveal the truth, and it will reveal the truth through its beauty. And that truth could be the truth about the cold pastoral, the truth that real breathing life, that a life that has process, love that goes bad, health that dies, age that deteriorates. Uh, the, the reality of life is, in a sense, superior to that idealistic or ideal portrait that is presented in the urn. Um, again, Greek art, Greek thought, Greek literature was considered the the best, the most high kind of study in England at that time. It's still probably today because the Greeks idealized everything, um, and Keats was very much attracted to that Greek sense of things being ideal and things being beautiful, rather than the specific and the particulars of actual life, which are fall far from those ideals. So, in many ways, I just wanted to say that this poem, Ode to Grecian Urn, is very much like Ode to a Nightingale, in that it um, has this incredible exuberance over um, an experience. For the nightingale, it was the experience of the nightingale itself, and what it and the thoughts that lead that the thoughts that the nightingale leads Keats on. And again, there's an exuberance about this Grecian urn that he looks at, um, that he starts to his mind starts to kind of luxuriate and become entranced and enamored with this kind of world that it portrays. But the thinking process, the poem itself is the thinking process, which um, makes Keats realize that although these things are beautiful, the Nightingale song, the beauty of the ideal beauty of the urn, that real life is still better, still more beautiful, um, because it is not cold. Um, and in Nightingale, it is not deceiving, as he talks about the nightingale. It's not real, in the sense the vase is also not real. The world, the life that is presented in this vase, is also not real. Okay, now this is a difficult poem, and sort of again, it's the archaic language, it's the elevated tone, it's the fact that Keats deals with this Greek subject, and so it has to be it has to be elevated. But you know, I think what's unique about Keats is that his poetry seems to start somewhere, and he seems to kind of enter into a um, uh, fantasy. But when he takes the thinking process to its logical conclusion, he realizes that he was wrong, in a sense, that he shouldn't have believed this. Um, so there it is. I'm going to post a short uh, lecture about his one of the last odes called "To Autumn," and then I will discuss the assignment as well. All right. Thank you for listening to this.